Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Hey, warm-up for the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got another Conference Preview Edition podcast for you as we are going to be diving in on the MAC today. The one with 1A, not the one with 2As, by the way, but that said, we've got ourselves a lot of fun to be taking a look at with regards to the MAC. We've got a new team with UMass entering in here in segment number 1. We're going to take a look at the styles of play and some of the trends that you do get with the MAC. In segment number 2, our good friend Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. He's going to be joining me and we're going to be chatting with them about what we all have with regards to the MAC, some of the coaching changes that we saw in the offseason. We're going to be taking a look at all 13 teams and we're going to be taking a look at the rosters, and in the final segment I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for the MAC. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds anywhere and at any time. Over at EdgeBoost, they allow you to be able to get cashback rewards as you utilize their fine service, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's get down to business and let's take a look at a MAC that really did not do a great job of being able to guard the three-point line. That was one of the hallmarks that you were able to find with this conference, as it was all headlined by the fact that you had some less than savory defense from Toledo. They were 350th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as they are typically a rough defense, but 357th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Northern Illinois not too far behind at 355th in the country with this regard. Eastern Michigan 352nd in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Ohio 349th, Buffalo 343rd. So there were threes upon threes being made in this conference, despite the fact that Kent State was one of the colder teams from three-point range in the entirety of the conference as well. So and that was very interesting to say the least, as you did have quite a few teams that were really not good three-point shooting teams. Despite that, you had so many teams that were not good in terms of being able to guard the three-point line as well. Western Michigan was 361st in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage, and dead last at home, 25.7% is what they shot from three-point range overall last season. UMass, who joins the conference, well, they were 362nd in all of college basketball with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage, so that was relatively rough for them. And then just take a look up and down the boulevard, and you had a lot of teams that just weren't able to knock down those threes. You had Kent State be outside the top 275 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. They were actually a lot better on the road with their three-point shooting percentage rather than when they were at home. Now, you did have some dynamo three-point shooting teams as well. Miami of Ohio, they were 15th in all of college basketball with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage at 38.2%. Toledo is typically a really good three-point shooting team. They were a little bit down for their standards, but still a team that was able to knock down a few threes, especially towards the back half of the season. They were more around about 191st in all of college basketball with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. Central Michigan has a new voice, so you can throw out some of these numbers because now they bring in the Ferris State head coach in Andy Brockma. Hopefully I said that correctly, but for Central Michigan, they were about 298th in the country with their own three-point shooting percentage, and then Eastern Michigan, they were about 116th, so and you had some ups and downs there. Akron was a 36.5% three-point shooting team, but again, a lot of rough defenses out there in this conference, but The teams that were able to do an okay job of just being able to hold up, defend the three-point line a little bit, they were the teams that were really able to have success, as it was a little bit of a hodgepodge conference, and we have noticed that for the MAC, it's been a little bit more rough for them ever since the NIL era really began, so we have seen a little bit of diminishment in my opinion, but I do think that it's not just my opinion, because you take a look at the against the spread records that you had for these MAC teams last year. You only had one team that was really able to buzz through and was able to make you some money. Miami of Ohio, 19-12-1 against the spread. They were a rock solid bet on team. Past that, you had one other team above 500, with Bowling Green being 16-15-1 against the spread. When you fight the juice, you're still not even being able to be profitable there. At 500 against the spread, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, and Eastern Michigan. And then Akron was 16-17 against the spread. You had Kent State 15-16-3 against the spread. So it's not like you had big losers. Toledo 15-17 against the spread. Ball State was 13-15 against the spread. Buffalo was 13-16 against the spread. And then Iowa was the team that was bringing up the rear, 12-19 against the spread. Their defense was a little bit less than amazing, so that was really hurting them, and you were able to find a few teams that were very good in the role of a favorite. Bowling Green was actually very much one of them, 9-4 against the spread. In the Miami of Ohio, they went 13-17-1 against the spread, but past that, you take a look at the rest of these teams. Toledo was 7-11 against the spread as a favorite. Ball State 5-8 against the spread as a favorite. Central Michigan 6-10 against the spread as a favorite. Ohio 8-16 against the spread as a favorite. So you had a lot of these teams that they just weren't able to bust through when they were laying points. This was very much an underdog conference last year, but you can tell that a lot of these teams, they just really struggled in non-conference play. It just felt like the MAC was a little bbit overvalued last season, because it's just not quite the conference that we saw in the past. And I mean, really, the lone teams that were able to bust out and be more than a game above 500, Kent State 8-4-2 against the spread in non-conference play. Toledo 7-5 against the spread in non-conference play. Buffalo and Central Michigan actually went 6-5 against the spread in non-conference play, but then you had Miami of Ohio, Western Michigan either be 5-6 or 5-6-1 against the spread in non-conference play. Ball State went 4-6 against the spread. Northern Illinois 3-7 against the spread, and then Ohio was 3-9. So that was a little bit less than amazing, as these teams, they just weren't able to do a good job of being able to go on the road and be able to cover games. As you just take a look at this conference, and these teams weren't able to cover at home, strangely. These teams on the road were pretty solid. Toledo was 9-6 against the spread on the road. Western Michigan, Kent State both 9-6-1 against the spread on the road. Buffalo was 9-7. Ball State, Bowling Green, they were 7-6 against the spread on the road. Central Michigan, Northern Illinois, Akron, they were all 500 against the spread on the road. Lone team that really wasn't good, Ohio 3-10 against the spread on the road, so that was less than amazing. But you take a look at what these teams did at home, and it was very, very rough for everyone except for Miami of Ohio. Went 9-4 against the spread at home with one push, and then you take a look at Ball State 5-8 against the spread when they were at home. Kent State 4-7-2 against the spread at home. Western Michigan 5-9 against the spread at home. Toledo 4-8 against the spread at home, and then Buffalo, they were 4-9. So you had a lot of issues there. And then in terms of the totals with this conference, because I mentioned it, you had a lot of teams that they didn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but you had a lot of teams that really didn't guard the 3-point line well as well. You had yourself quite a few overwhelming teams. Now, you did have two really good teams to the under. Kent State 13 overs and 21 unders last season. Meanwhile, Northern Illinois 10 overs, 17 unders, and a push. But Ohio 20 overs, 10 unders, and a push. Eastern Michigan 19 overs, 21 unders. Akron 19 overs, 13 unders, and a push. Central Michigan 17 overs, 12 unders. Toledo 18 and 14 to the over. Ball State 15 overs, 13 unders. So you had a lot of that going on. And what I thought was very interesting was taking a look at the divide between conference and non-conference games with regards to these totals, because in conference games, you had two teams that were very demonstrative to the over. Ohio 13 overs to 6 unders. Toledo 12 overs to 8 unders. But you had four different teams at least 57.9% to the under. Western Michigan 8 overs, 11 unders. Bowling Green 8 overs, 11 unders. Northern Illinois 7 overs to 11 unders, and Buffalo 7 overs to 11 unders. Commonality: all these teams really did not shoot it well from 3-point range last season. Meanwhile, your teams that shot it better from 3-point range, like Akron 12 and 9 to the over. Central Michigan 10 overs, 8 unders. They were more of a, shall we say, less than tremendous team with regards to their 3-point shooting, but still you get the point there. And then when it came to the non-conference portion of things, that's where these defenses really were exposed, as you had four teams that played more unders than overs. Bowling Green 6 overs to 7 unders in non-conference play. Western Michigan 5 overs, 6 unders, and a push. Northern Illinois, 3 overs, 6 unders, and a push, and then Kent State, 4 overs to 10 unders. Meanwhile, for Ohio, Central Michigan, and Akron, they all either went 7 overs, 4 unders, and a push, or just 7 overs, 4 unders with no push, and then Eastern Michigan, 8 overs and 4 unders. So it's a very interesting conference. You have a little bit of travel. It's not too adverse. You do add in there the state of Massachusetts with the UMass Minutemen, but obviously a very fascinating conference with 13 teams, and we're going to break them all down next with our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, and he joins me right here on the flip side on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast, the MAC Conference Preview Edition.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. That's ziprecruiter.com/zip. ziprecruiter.com/zip.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is a MAC Conference Preview Edition, and to talk about the return of the MAC, we've got one of our good friends, Rob Donaldson, aboard. He does a great job with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Catch him on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson for all of his tremendous work over there, as I know he's doing a lot of baseball this time of year, but he's always in tune with his college hoops knowledge. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. I absolutely love the MAC, and every single year I get asked, like, why are you betting on Central Michigan versus Northern Illinois in November? And it's because of the prep work that we do on the front end during these types of months of understanding where a program is at, understanding what their upside potentially could be, and just kind of understanding that yeah, these teams might not be part of the NCAA tournament or the national picture when you're talking about what ESPN is going to headline, but this is betting value. This is still really great basketball, and I think a lot of times this gets taken for granted.
Absolutely. It's not taken for granted by us. We absolutely love this conference. The others out there, they don't seem to appreciate the fine value that we find in the MAC. But that said, with regards to the MAC, we do have a new team in there in UMass. And how do we take a look at a UMass bunch that, let's call it what it is, it was a rough season for them last year out there in the Atlantic 10. But I do think that Frank Martin is so relatively rock-solid coach. They do bring back guys like Daniel Hink and Sanford and company, and it appears very clear that they're going to be looking to build down low, which is something that you don't find a lot in this conference.
Yeah, when you are looking at the MAC or even like conferences that are a little bit akin, whether you're talking about, you know, I would just spitball like the Sun Belt or, you know, the Conference USA, like those sorts of conferences that maybe are kind of in that same tier. It is a little bit of a step down from like the A10 and Mountain West types of competition. And I do feel like that placates to a style of a Frank Martin that is very, you know, sort of like defensive driven, or sort of where they win is on one side of the floor, because you can actually have that style play in the MAC really, really well and have success with it. And I think, yes, it's unfortunate that UMass isn't going to be competing in that same environment that we've kind of come accustomed to over the years watching them. But I think in terms of actually heightening their season success and their play on the court, this is going to play as a good transition, I think, on the front end.
Yep, I think so as well, and I do think that there's a lot of upside with regards to this UMass team, especially after last year. It was just very much less than savory for them. And you mentioned Northern Illinois at the top, so how about if we address Northern Illinois, because they have been the dregs of this conference for a very long time. For Northern Illinois, they've been looking to bust out as they have been above 500 twice in the last 19 years. But I think bringing in Jayo Atika, who is a Metro Atlantic Rookie of the Year over at Marist many years ago, he was over on that Jacksonville State team. I think that that's a step in the right direction for them. G&I Cobb is someone I think can come in, be able to play for this team as well. I look at Northern Illinois, and I still think that they're going to be pretty sad and sorry, but at the very least, it's improvement.
Yeah, and this is also another team that kind of like UMass is, going down a level. They're trying to say, hey, we can't compete in the MAC. We understand that. Let's go down to the Horizon League. And I respect that because, they haven't been relevant for a very long time. And yeah, they've had some pretty good players come through the program. You look at David Coit, who went on to Kansas, gave them quality minutes last season. That's a Northern Illinois product. And they have had a lot of guys over the years that as individuals were actually very respectable. And when you're looking at this roster, maybe I'm not totally in love with it this year. I think there's actually some more bottom feeders in the MAC that I would like to have the upside buy-in a little bit more to. But yeah, I think Northern Illinois, they're going to be kind of stagnant with who they've been over the past few years here.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a rough go of it for them as well. And off the top, you also mentioned Central Michigan, so we're going to go with Central Michigan next. As for them, they bring in Division II Andy Brockma to be able to coach up this team after Tony Barbie. He was a big name that really didn't get big results for the team. I look at Fat Brooks, which that's an interesting name, by the way, coming in from Michigan. That should be able to help out this team a little bit. They bring in Rodney Johnson, who was rock solid over at Tennessee Tech. They've got a lot of inexperience. They're going to be bringing in a lot of D2 guys, but I do think that with Brocknama, he comes in, and I think that he's going to be able to run a tight ship, and I do think that he's going to be able to get his program set up right away.
And sometimes returning minutes, if the minutes were bad, isn't really, a beneficial thing to a year-over-year lap. And, to your point, when you're bringing in a guy from D2 and a guy with that sort of different outlook, sometimes it can really play as a benefit. We just saw it at Drake, and yes, obviously, Ben McCollum, a little bit of an upgrade in terms of him being a national champion in the D2 level for multiple seasons, but I still think there's a really solid benefit to having that large scope approach to a team build, and I think that's exactly what Central Michigan needed after kind of hitting a lot of roadblocks over the past just decade here.
Yeah, they certainly have hit a bunch of roadblocks. It's been a bit of an issue for them, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of upside here, and these G2 guys have come up to the Division I level, and many of them have had success right away, as we're always successful on this podcast when we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He's joining me right here on Cusco Soup. It's a MAC Conference Preview Edition, and out there in the MAC, this team has really been the dominant team over the last few years. That'd be Akron. Akron last year was really going up tempo, and I think that it's very fascinating what Coach Gross does over there, as John Gross has played this team very, very fast. He's played this team very, very slow in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they were a super slow team. Last year, they were a super fast team. Now they bring back Tavari Johnson, who was able to average 13 points per game. Recognize that they do lose quite a few pieces off that NCAA tournament team, but Evan Mahaffey, hopefully I said that correct. He comes in from Ohio State after he spent some time as a part-time starter 2 seasons ago. Sharon Young coming back as well. I feel pretty good about this Akron team once again being rock solid out there in the MAC.
Yeah, and the MAC always runs through Ohio, just the state, because of the teams that make up the state of Ohio in this league. And Akron under John Gross have been a consistent force. I would liken them to like a Liberty, whether it's in the A-Sun or just kind of wherever they are in terms of their league. Akron seemingly is always at the top of the MAC standings in one form or another. They've had just constant roster turnover over the past 5 years even, but it hasn't mattered. They've replaced talent with even more talent, and they're replacing talent at different positions, obviously, as well. And I think that no matter what they do in terms of who they add in, John Gross is going to make this competitive roster. And to be honest, you look at this roster compared to last year, I think there's actually an upside to even perform at that same level or even just, have a better year overall as well.
Yep, and then when it comes to this team, I do think that there's quite a bit of upside here. As you mentioned that the MAC, it runs through the great state of Ohio, and it certainly does, but how about Muncie, Indiana, and Ball State with the fact that they bring in Davon Barnes? He was over at UTEP. He was a part of a UTEP team that did a great job of generating turnovers, which you don't find a lot of in the MAC. He was averaging 10 points per game over there. Jawan Maxey comes in from Youngstown State, so he does come in from the great state of Ohio. He was averaging 11 points per contest. Cam Denson is a guy that has Division I experience, and for Ball State, it's really interesting because they don't really have anyone above 6'7" with Division I experience, but these guys are bombers, and they've got a lot of guys that are going to be looking to shoot it from 3-point range.
And Michael Lewis's tenure so far has kind of been met with just really the staple being roster turnover. And it's been like lateral moves where guys come into the program for 1 year and then go transfer down to, say, Incarnate Word was, I think, the big one last year. A lot of players from Ball State played their basketball at Incarnate Word last season. And that's sort of, I guess, been the MO. And when you do adopt that style, you're going to see a lot of year-to-year volatility, but that's just the way that the game is moving anyway. And right again this year, they have a fresh new lineup with a lot of new faces here. And I think to a degree, that might be a good thing. Again, they underperformed last year based on what the three-year arc kind of looked like for Michael Lewis out the gate. And I feel like when you can replace those bad minutes with the upside to upgrade those minutes in terms of performance, it's always a really nice thing to have under your belt going into a season.
I think that it is as well, and I do think that for Ball State, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, their small ball approach, and this is one team that I just love their coach, Bowling Green, Todd Simon. He does a great job of being able to bring in guys from the junior college ranks. He's bringing in Aiden Goins this year. He's ranked number 35 according to JUCORecruiting.com. He's going to be rock solid. This team needs to do a better job on the glass. They're in 21st in offensive rebound percentage last year, but bringing back Javante Campbell, who was so good at the guard spot, was big for them. And I look at bringing in a guy like a Justin Thomas, who spent some time at UW-Milwaukee. He also spent some time at Florida State, and I'm feeling very good about this Bowling Green team.
I love Todd Simon. What he did at Southern Utah in terms of building that team into a perennial sort of top of that conference sort of team was a very, I think, accomplished task. And yeah, he's one of those guys that I know it's not truly a lateral move, but when you go from one mid-major to only a slightly higher mid-major in Bowling Green, it's one of those moves that I feel like gets lost in the shuffle of all the other sort of billboard-ish type of coaching changes. But Todd Simon is legit, and kind of like what we saw with Travis Steele last year at Miami of Ohio, taking a team that won 12 games the year prior up to 25 wins. I think Todd Simon could have a similar result, maybe not 25 and competing for an NCAA tournament bid, but maybe in that 20-win category is where he would get, and that wouldn't be something new just given his track record.
Absolutely. With Todd Simon, I love him as a coach. He even was the interim coach at UNLV way back in the day as well. He did a solid job, and I honestly thought he probably should have gotten that job myself. So a lot of respect for Todd Simon and a lot of respect for Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's the Best. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and this team needs to improve the three-point shooting. I'm talking about Western Michigan. They shot 25.7% from three-point range at home. Like, good grief. That was not good. And now they turn to Justice Williams, who missed all of last year after 2 years ago. He was one of the primary scorers over at Robert Morris. I thought that he was pretty solid over at Robert Morris. They bring back Max Burton, and this team was solid on the glass, but I have my question marks with the outside shooting. They brought in a few guys like Trey Lewis, Jalen Griffin to be able to help out, but I think that it's interesting, the strategy that Western Michigan has coming into the season.
Yeah, and obviously this is year 4 now for Dwayne Stevens, and what really kind of bummed me out, I was on the Dwayne Stevens hype train after going into year 2, and yeah, there was a bump in wins. They went from 8 wins in the basement to 12 wins still in the basement, but at the same time, they were retaining players in a time period at that point in time where everybody was jumping ship to the higher majors or even down transferring to get more minutes on a more winning program. And Western Michigan was seemingly a team that was going to hemorrhage a lot of talent. Well, they actually had guys stay in-house and play for 3-4 years under Dwayne Stevens. And now it's a matter of, okay, well, those guys kind of phased out through the program. They're still sitting in this 12-win column. I almost kind of feel like this might be a make-or-break year for Dwayne Stevens, and I don't have as much optimism as I did 2 years ago when I look at not only just the roster, but the trajectory, and for that reason, hey, I hope I'm proven wrong, but Western Michigan, again, just kind of feels like one of those basement teams in the MAC to me.
Yeah, it does to me as well. They just need to be able to be a more complete team because they do one thing very well on one side of the ball, and then on the other side of the ball, they give you absolutely nothing whatsoever. And that's really the big issue that I've got for Western Michigan right now. And when it comes to another one of the directional Michigan teams, Eastern Michigan, they actually took some strides forward last year under Stan Heath, who I can't say that I'm necessarily a stan of Stan Heath, for lack of a better term. But I mean, they bring in John Sanders, who was relatively rock solid at Northwestern State. And it's a Northwestern State duo as he and Addison Patterson actually both come in. You're talking about Ball State losing guys to Southland. Eastern Michigan is importing from the Southland. So good, clean family fun there. Beck Mancioni Theo comes over from Detroit. He's relatively solid, and they bring in Mekhi Olsen, who was a nice sharpshooter over at Stetson last season. I think that's an interesting Eastern Michigan team that it felt like they finally got something going forward last season. An incomplete team, but it does feel like they're finally going in the right direction.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about like earlier, replacing bad minutes with new minutes isn't always a bad thing, but when you did have sort of that positive 500-ish type year, and you only bring back 3.2% of your starting minutes or just general minutes in total from your roster last year, now it's like, okay, this could go a number of different directions. Maybe, just maybe Stan Heath might be kind of figuring out how to really attack this conference stylistically, and it's just from like a roster building standpoint. Or maybe he had his window and we saw the best of it, and now it's kind of back to what we know them to be. And that's what ultimately makes them a big wild card to me. I'm not going to be a big believer. I'm not going to be a big fader out the gate. I kind of want to see what they can show me in the early goings, but it's definitely a team that I'm highlighting and keeping close tabs on.
And I'm keeping close tabs on this team as to whether or not they're going to be as awful as they were last year. Buffalo, 13-49 over the last 2 years. Remember when Nate Oates was there? Remember when Bobby Hurley was there? Thing of the past right now is they do bring back Ryan Sable. He was giving the team 14 points, pair of assists per contest, so that does help them out a little bit, but man, this has been a team that has been rough. I like the fact that they bring in Angelo Breezy. He was over at Davidson, shot 40% from three, but this is a team that has a lot of work to do to get back to where they were many, many years ago.
Yeah, and what I will say, we've been talking about 2-year and 3-year head coaches all offseason. Well, we have a 3-year head coach right now who kind of similarly to Dwayne Stevens in the early going has seen a bump. And yeah, it's not the biggest bump. They went from the basement to the basement. They went from 4-27 to 9-22. But when you're doubling your wins over the course of just a 1-year season, and you are retaining 40% of the minutes from last year, people are buying into this program despite the wins not being there. And to me, that does say something. And yeah, Buffalo, again, we might not be talking about an NCAA tournament return. We might not talk about them as a team that actually competes at the top of the MAC. But when they're catching 19.5 against Ohio or Kent State or Akron, or playing a high major team and catching 28.5, maybe I'm going to throw a bet at Buffalo because they are retained. They did believe in what that was getting preached last season, and they did see a bump in their win total. And heck, I remember them taking, I believe it was Akron down to the wire in the first half last season on their home floor. That's kind of a sticking point to believe in going into next season. So I'm actually a little bit bullish on the Bulls, if that kind of translates there.
And I did like the fact that they brought in Breezy from Davidson. He's a good three-point shooter. That'll help them out. And Armani Mighty, one of the best names out there in the MAC, he does look to be very, very mighty for this team as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, joining me right here on Cusco Soups. And they're obviously a fascinating team to take a look at. But how about the Golden Flashes of Kent State, a team that 2 seasons ago, they were able to make the NCAA tournament, one of the stalwarts of this conference. Sion Medley is back in the fold after he was able to give the team 4 assists per contest. Not necessarily too much of a scorer, but a guy that does a great job of being able to distribute the ball. Delreco Gillespie is a guy that's able to give you a lot of rebounding as well. They bring in Rayvon Griffith, a former top 100 recruit as well, and I think that for this Kent State team, they should be one of the top teams out there in the MAC once again, as they typically are.
Yeah, and there's a few different fixture head coaches here in this league, and when you are looking at Kent State and Rob Senderoff, he is one of those guys where, yes, he is going to filter through talent year over year because he retains his guys. I mean, yeah, they kind of underperformed the last 2 based on the Kent State expectation, but at the same time, he still has talent, and he had talent last year. It just didn't translate. And guess what? You look at the high major level, you look at Kentucky, John Calipari got fired or resigned or whatever happened there. And it's going to happen when you have some down years. And based on your program, sometimes you're going to be accepting of that, or you're just going to be like, you're gone. Just that's the nature of expectations. And I do feel like when you're at Kent State, you know what you have is good, and you're constantly bringing in talent and retaining talent. That's going to play in year over year. And once again, I think Kent State is going to be at the top 3 of this league without question.
Yep, I am very bullish on Kent State as well. I absolutely love what that program has been able to churn out year in and year out. And I mean, for Travis Steele, I wasn't necessarily a fan of him over at Xavier. I thought that it was a little bit too big of a job for him. But now that he's been over at Miami of Ohio, it feels like he's starting to get things rolling over there. The team was 15th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and they returned two of their top three scorers, Ian Elmore along with Peter Suter. I think that these are very big pieces for this team. Brant Byers is another guy that was able to shoot it really well from three-point range. And when it comes to this Miami of Ohio team, I do feel relatively bullish about them coming into this upcoming season because they've got what a lot of mid-major teams don't. Guys returning from season ago.
Yeah, 67% to be exact. That's a staggering number. You're not going to find that in most
this day and age. Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And you won't even find that just in general from program to program at the high major level, not only because of the portal, but because of graduation talent as well. But that just kind of speaks to Miami of Ohio coming out of absolute nowhere last year and the players believing in what they were able to accomplish. This team should have made the NCAA tournament. They flat out kind of just blew it against Akron in the MAC championship game that would have secured their bid. They know that. And I have seen this kind of story play out with like a Hofstra under, Speedy Claxton in years past when they had veterans returning. They lost in the CAA championship game and then won it the next year. And I do feel like when you're talking about a team that retains this many guys, was talented last year, and has that sort of coach that has coached at the higher level to understand the context, they're going to be ready to go. And I do kind of potentially fear that letdown, but at the very like shortest level, there's going to be a high floor. And I really love that about this Miami of Ohio team.
Oh, I absolutely love that as well. This Miami of Ohio bunch, I think, is very much set up for success once again this season. Having all that camaraderie and that chemistry coming back, I think that is massive for them. And I think that this is such an interesting team because we know exactly what Toledo is. Toledo is going to be rock solid on offense, and they're going to stink up the joint on defense. They're 50th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year, but things are sunny. Sonny Wilson is back for the team with about 15 points per contest. I like the fact that they bring in Kyler Vanderjagt from within the conference over at Central Michigan, and I think that it's an interesting team that, with the just approach that you get from Todd Kowalczyk, it's not necessarily one that I think is going to be conducive to winning in like the NCAA tournament or getting to the NCAA tournament, but the team usually has good results in the MAC, and I think that they bounce back a little bit from a rough year last year.
Yeah, the NCAA tournament only makes up, 1 to 6 games in a season of 40 plus. And when you're talking about Toledo, you're looking at a team that is always a constant fixture. Again, we talked about, with Rob Senderoff at Kent State. Well, Todd Kowalczyk is the Toledo equivalent. And also, when you're looking at Toledo, yes, they have that high variance approach offensively that can potentially play a little bit volatile in terms of maybe early going success, especially if you're playing at a high major type of level. But at the same time, I am not worried about Toledo ever. When Todd Kowalczyk is there, he's a proven winner. He's going to have a high floor. And it's just a matter of, can they get over that hump? I don't really know if I believe in that just yet. It's one of those teams that I would kind of want to see it to believe it, to think that they're going to be like at the top of this league with Akron, Miami of Ohio, Kent State. But I do think they're going to be a team that at least challenges those teams game in and game out. And you got to respect that after so many years with Todd Kowalczyk.
Yep, absolutely. Todd Kowalczyk, he has been able to do a great job over at Toledo. Again, I'm not necessarily a stan of the style, but he has certainly been able to get results with it all throughout his tenure, and this is a team that I think is well coached as well. Jeff Bowles over at Ohio, he always does a rock-solid job with his teams. Granted, last year, defense was a little bit rough with regards regarding the three-point shot, but that's Jackson Pavelski, who began his career at Wofford, was good enough to be able to be at Iowa State a few seasons ago. He's back. You bring in Javon Simmons. We were just talking about Toledo. He comes in after he had like 12.5 points per game over at Toledo. D.R. Connors was a 40% three-point shooter last year. Jalen Breath is able to fortify that front court, which was a big issue for them last year. Just feels like Ohio is a more complete team coming into this year. And Jeff Bowles, I have no question about his coaching. I think he's going to be able to get the most out of what I think is a pretty solid roster.
Yeah, in-game coaching, Jeff Bowles has got it. And also from a roster building standpoint and identifying talent, Jeff Bowles has got it. Everybody wants his players, and they're willing to pay lots of money. I'm looking at you, Mark Sears, and, there's a number of other dudes who have jumped to the NBA from Ohio. That just doesn't happen at this type of level. You can't just constantly identify the best guards in all of college basketball to play for your university that, oh yeah, happens to be in the MAC conference. Like, that's just something that is such an impressive feat that Jeff Bowles has been able to pull off. And when I look at this little chart that I have here in front of me and I see 46% of the minutes returning, I don't need to know the names. I trust Jeff Bowles. 46% from last year returning is probably a good thing. And having those guys in the program, yeah, I would say they're probably one of the more talented schools within this conference. And so again, you want to talk about a team that potentially just could elevate from that 500 record they posted last year to a conference leader. I think Ohio is absolutely in that upside kind of category.
I think that they are as well. I like this Ohio bunch. I think that they're going to be able to have themselves a great season, but I mean, there's always upside with this podcast when you're aboard, Rob, because you do such an excellent job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. We ran through every single MAC team with you, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, we've been covering so many bases with college basketball this offseason. I thank you so much for having me on, and for those who want to follow my college basketball bets, once that comes into frame, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Rob does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector finish for the MAC.
Celebrate over 100 years of steak perfection with Omaha Steaks. Right now, save 50% site-wide during their anniversary sale. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED at omahasteaks.com today. They're America's original butcher, and only Omaha Steaks delivers a full lineup of extra-aged steaks so tender, they're USDA certified tender. Their customer favorite filet mignon has even been elevated to USDA certified very tender. And that attention to quality doesn't just stop with steaks. We're talking beefy burgers, air-chilled chicken, premium pork, and so much more. And every bite is backed by their 100% guarantee. Shop now to save 50% site-wide on steaks and more during the anniversary sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code CERTIFIED at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code CERTIFIED. Minimum purchase may apply. See site for details.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is a MAC Conference Preview Edition, and it was great to be able to get our good friend Rob Donaldson aboard to be able to break it down. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector order finish for the MAC, as per usual, because I am doing a conference preview edition today. That means that any news and notes that we saw in college basketball on the previous day, I will recap those on the podcast tomorrow, so have no fear. Those will not be neglected, but I always do want to give the proper sparkle and shine to all these conference previews, and we are doing so once again today. So how about if we dive in with my projector or finish, and at dead last of my projector or finish number 13, I do have to go with Buffalo. Just not a lot of encouraging signs whatsoever for this team, even though they do bring back Ryan Sable. Sable was one of the top guys for them last season, 14.4 points per contest, shot 35% from three. Noah Batchelor, who actually began his career over at Maryland, 6.5 points and team high 6.1 rebounds per game. And I actually do like a few of the pieces coming in. Angelo Breezy, he was a 40% three-point shooter over at Davidson. You bring in a little bit of size with Armani Mighty, who began his career at Boston College, Tim Oba, but I have no faith whatsoever in this coaching staff whatsoever. I just don't think that they're going to be able to get things turned around, as ever since Nate Oates left, it's been going further and further downhill. George Halkovich has just not done a good job of being able to put out there a good product on the floor. I think that is going to be the case once again, and I think that Buffalo is just being left in the dust right now. So dead last in my projector or finish, I'm going to be going with Buffalo. At number 12 in my projector or finish, I'm going with Western Michigan. Even though I did like the addition of Justice Lewis, 12 points per contest, a little bit of like a selfish player, a guy that turns the ball over a little bit more than what I would like. So I have my issues there. They do bring in Trey Lewis, who is able to shoot in the neighborhood about 38% from three-point range at Fort Wayne, to help out the fact that they shot 25.7% from three-point range at home last season. Just absolutely awful. Jalen Griffith, he was an honorable mention for JUCO Recruiting's top 100. He was averaging 15.5 points, 5.5 assists per contest at the lower level, so should be able to help out this point guard spot a little bit. Max Burton was able to give you 5 rebounds per game, but for Western Michigan, I just still have all sorts of question marks with regards to this backcourt. I don't think that it's going to be getting a lot better this season, so I did have to put them in my projector finish at old number 12. At number 11 in my projector finish, I just don't know what we're going to be able to get out of Central Michigan this year, so by deficit of the doubt, I do have to put them here. Even though Andy Brockma, he comes on over from Ferris State, and I think that he's going to do a solid job. Fat Brooks is a former top 200 recruit, began his career over at Michigan, couldn't really get out there on the floor, but I do have a little bit of upside there. Ronnie Johnson, he's a rock-solid player that comes in from Tennessee Tech. He was able to deliver 13 points, 5.5 boards, shot 40% from three-point range, and then you got a lot of non-Division I guys that come in. Keenan Gardner, he was over at IU Indy last year, about 5.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but I do have to just take a look at things with regards to Central Michigan and temper my expectations just a little bit. I do think that they're going to play an up-tempo and an exciting brand of basketball. Over at Ferris State last season, Brockma, he was able to get that team firing all cylinders. They were averaging over 82 points per contest. They bring back Demarion Bonds from 8 seasons ago as well, who was limited due to injury, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a rough year for all the directional Michigan schools, including Central Michigan. So with Central Michigan, I had to put them at number 11 in terms of my projector finish. At number 10 in my projector finish, I have to go with Eastern Michigan. With Eastern Michigan, I do think that they were able to find a little bit of something last year, and for Eastern Michigan, they bring in the two guys from Northwestern State. Addison Patterson, a former top 100 recruit who was very solid in terms of being able to stuff the stat sheet last season, a guy that was able to give you 13 plus points per contest, held in there 5 plus rebounds per game, not a guy that's going to really light you up from three-point range or anything like that, but I like his overall versatility and his overall game. And then John Sanders, he was solid with about 9 points per contest. He was more of your three-point shooter at 40% from the outside. Makai Ellison, he was a good three-point shooter at Stetson. Stetson team that really didn't play any defense, but you know what? He was averaging about 14.5 points per contest, and Aiden Rubio just was unable to get out there on the floor. Over at UNC Asheville last season, 2 years ago, was shooting over at Central Michigan 40% from three with 7 points per contest. Team really needs to bulk up with regards to their defense. This defense last season was 320th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 352nd in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and with the guys that they brought in, I don't think that this is going to be a very good defense. So had ducked them a little bit there. As a result, with my projector finish for Eastern Michigan, I did have to put them at number 10. At number 9, I'm going to be going with Ball State. With Ball State, it's a bold strategy that they're taking because they really don't have a lot of size. You don't have a single guy with a Division I experience that's really above 6'7", but you do have a lot of guards out there. Davon Barnes over at UTEP last year, 10 points, 2 assists, 1.6 steals per contest. He'll be able to help out on the defensive side of things a little bit in terms of being able to generate turnovers. Jawan Maxey, 11.5 points per game over at Youngstown State last season, a solid three-point shooter. And Elmore James over at Ohio was a 37% three-point shooter, but I think that this team is going to get romped down low. You do bring in a guy in Cam Denson who was over at Long Beach State. He was averaging about 4.5 points, 3 rebounds per contest, so I do like his overall game, but I do take a look at this Ball State team just being a little bit undersized. They do bring in Armani Ziegler from St. Peter's as well. He's able to play a little bit bigger than his size, should be able to help out defensively, but I do feel like it's a little bit hit or miss, and you're banking on Caden Fish, a former top 200 recruit that rode the bench for at Iowa State a few seasons ago to really be able to give you some good production. I don't know if he does so. And my projector finish at number 9, I had to go with Ball State. At number 8, I'm going with Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is a team that I actually think has some upside. I love the fact that they brought in Jayo Atika. He was the MAC Freshman of the Year, the Metro Atlantic Freshman of the Year during the 2021-22 season. That season, 15 points per contest, shot 41% from three-point range. I absolutely love his overall game. J.J. Taylor comes on over from Central Florida. He was averaging about 4.5 points per contest as a 6'8", little bit of a reserve. And then you've got Gianni Cobb, who was able to give you 4.5 points, a steal per contest over at Columbia last season. DeMar Kelly, he was solid over at St. Francis, Pennsylvania. He's able to give you some good rebounding with about 4 boards per contest. Terry Copeland, he's coming back after he was limited just one game last season. And Jalen Wharton, he was over at South Florida. Florida. Couldn't come into the fold for South Florida last year, but was a very highly touted junior college guy. I think that Northern Illinois is really starting to elevate themselves. They've been above 500 only 2 out of the last 19 years, but I think that this is a sign of growth for them. Number 8 in my projected order finish, going with Northern Illinois. Number 7, I'm going with Toledo. With Toledo, you know that the offense is going to be there, and they do bring back Sonny Wilson, who is averaging 14 points, 3 assists per contest, and I like Kyler Vanderjagt. He comes on over from Central Michigan after he was able to do a nice job registering about 11 points per contest, shot 38% from three-point range. I think that he's going to come in there and give them an instant boost with regards to that offense. It's a Toledo team that always is based around three-point shooting. You bring in Minor Strong, who was very strong with his three-point shooting at the lower level over at Dodge City Community College. He was shooting about 39% from three-point range. He chipped in there some good production there. And then Chris Riddle, he was a former top 225 recruit. He was over at DePaul last year, really couldn't get out there on the floor. I think that he's got some upside, but again, this team was 350th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that they're going to struggle on the defensive side of things once again this season, and I do think that Sean Craig coming on over from IU Indy is going to be able to help out a little bit down low, but I do think that it's going to be an inconsistent team that's going to be great on offense, not so great on defense. Number 7 in my projector finish, going to be going with Toledo. At number 6, I go with the Minutemen of UMass. As UMass last season out there in the Atlantic 10, it was very much less than savory for them. They went 12-20, but they do bring in a guy, Leonardo Battelle. He was over at Abilene Christian last year, and I mean, this guy was solid. He was able to chip in there 13 points, 4 boards, and a steal per game. Marcus Banks over at UMBC, 16.5 points per contest, 2 assists. Like, this guy was able to shoot 42% from 3. That helps out a team that was in the bottom 10 nationally in terms of their three-point shooting percentage last year, 28% as a collective. Daniel Hankins Sanford, he was doing a nice job down low last season, 7.5 boards, 10 points per game, a little bit over a steal per contest. And Jaden Nadunji, 4.5 points, 4.5 boards, steal per contest. I think that he's going to be rock solid, as well as Dimitri Leclerc. He was over at JUCOrecruiting.com, their number 17 junior college transfer, a little bit of an international man of mystery, 11.7 rebounds per game. He adds to this team's identity of just being able to do a nice job of being able to haul in there some boards. When they had Josh Cohen and company a few seasons ago, Matt Cross, that was really what they did well. They're trying to be able to reinvent that. They brought in some three-point shooting to be able to help out as well with Kidgell Parker, who was over at Florida A&M a few seasons ago, went down to the junior college level at Florida Southwest, and he was rated by JUCOrecruiting.com as the number 69, very nice recruit in this year's cycle as well. He was averaging 17 points, 5 boards, 4 assists on 43% three-point shooting at the lower level, but again, I want to see it all put together for UMass, and I do think that the travel might be a little bit tough on them as well, though I don't think that it's as far as a lot of people realize, but still, it is going to be a little bit of a different landscape. So for UMass, I did put them at number 6 in terms of my projector finish. Number 5, I'm going with Bowling Green. I am very bullish on this team. They always do a nice job of finding these junior college guys. I think that Aiden Goins is the next of them. Rated by JUCOrecruiting.com as their number 35 guy in this cycle, 14 points, 6 boards, a block and a half per game on 44% three-point shooting. You remember Mr. Johnson, big sexy for the team last season. He's sort of like a 2.0 version of that. I absolutely love it. And they bring back Javante Campbell, who is one of the best players in the conference. 15 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 2.8 steals per contest. The steals per game ranked number 5 in all of college basketball. Javon Ruffin was over at Colorado. Saw some run as a part-time starter, 5.5 points per game. Relatively good three-point shooter. Justin Thomas last year had 4.8 points at a steal per contest over at Florida State. When he was at UW Milwaukee, a lower level a few seasons ago, he was able to do a bit of everything. 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal per contest. So I like that as well. And then Yusef Kayet, who began his career over at Michigan. Limited sample size last year, but he's back after averaging 8.5 points per game. Todd Simon, I trust in this one for Bowling Green. I set them at number 5 in terms of my projector finish. At number 4, I'm going to be going with Miami of Ohio. Good news for Miami of Ohio is that they bring back a lot of their key three-point shooters from a team that was 15th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage last year at 38.2%. Peter Suter, 13 points, 4 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. That's very rock solid. And then had Ian Elmore shoot 40% from 3 with about 11 points per contest, so you absolutely love to see that. Even Epsaro, he was able to chip in there like 3 assists per contest. He also shot 41% from 3. Luke Skolich, he was able to shoot 44% from the outside. And then you bring in Almar Atlison, who was a 6'8", little bit of a do-it-all player over at Bradley last season. He's able to shoot 38% from 3, but again, where is that rebounding going to be coming from? Where is that just down low presence other than Antoine Woolfolk, who began his career over at Rutgers last last year. He gave the team about 5.5 rebounds per game. I do think that that's going to be a little bit suspect. I have question marks with this Miami of Ohio defense as well, so that's a big reason why I had to put them at number 4 in terms of my projector finish. At number 3, I'm going to be going with Ohio. Jeff Bowles is a guy that I really trusted, and they bring back their main point guard in Jackson Pavelski. He elevated the team with 14 points, 4 boards, 4.8 assists per game, and then Javon Simmons, who's over at Toledo last year, he should be able to give some good versatility, 12.5 points, 7 boards, 2 assists per contest. Dior Connors was a 40% three-point shooter. This team, I have a feeling it's going to be much better defensively. Last year, they were, in terms of offensive rebound percentage of their missed shots that they got as an offensive rebound, 343rd, and they were 349th in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but getting back Elijah Elliott, who was able to give the team 5 points, 3 rebounds per game, that's going to be able to help them out. AJ Shelton is someone that should be able to give you a bit of something in the backcourt. 2 seasons ago, was able to shoot about 46% from three-point range. Last year, he averaged about 4.5 to 5 points per contest, so I think that he's going to be able to give you a little bit more as well. And then Jalen Breath, being able to haul in their 7 rebounds over at UNC Greensboro last season really does help this team out down low as well. So I do have Ohio at number 3 in terms of my projector finish. At number 2, I go with the Kent State Golden Flashes, bringing back Sion Medley, who wasn't much of a scorer but was a really good facilitator. I think is a great place to start with this team, as he averaged about 7 points, 4 assists per contest. And then Jabal Sumlin, who came on over from the junior college ranks, he was able to be a really explosive three-point shooter, shot 39% from 3, 5.5 points per contest. Darrell Gillespie, he's back after giving the team 8 rebounds per game overall last season, but last year, 11.1 points, 10.9 rebounds, 1.4 steals per contest in the final 16 games. Was really able to surge towards the back half of the season. You've got a former top 100 recruit in Rayvon Griffin from the class of 2023 coming in. He was on the bench over at Cincinnati last few seasons. He should be able to elevate this team. And Rob Whaley, he was averaging about 7.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game at UNLV 2 seasons ago, limited to just 2 games last year. I think that there's upside with him. Kent State, I think, is going to do a nice job of generating turnovers, but still do a nice job on glass as well. Very complete team. I've got them at number 2, my projector or finish, but at number 1, you have to go with Akron. 52 wins over the last 2 seasons, a pair of trips to the NCAA tournament. You get back Tavari Johnson, 13 points, team best 3.8 assists on 39% three-point shooting. Now, you do lose some of those guys from a season ago, like James Okonkwo down low, but Amani Lyles is back after he gave the team a block, 5.2 rebounds, 7.5 points per game. I absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table. Sharon Young was able to give you 7.5 points, 40% three-point shooting, and what we learned about John Gross is that he's able to play any style. 2 years ago, Akron was one of the slower teams at all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Last year, they gunned it. You're bringing in Evan Mahaffey, hopefully I said that correct, over at Ohio State. He was averaging about 3.5 points, 3 rebounds per contest off the bench. And 2 years ago, he was a little bit of like a part-time starter as well. I think that Akron is going to do a nice job down low. I like how balanced they are as well. And I do think that Akron finds a way to be able to win the conference once again. I don't want to doubt these guys. So I've got them at number 1 in terms of my projector finish. And that'll wrap things up for the MAC Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have 1 or 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry ZM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.